Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I'm finally going to be looking at openBSD. I say finally because there's been one of my viewers that's been after me to do this since about March, and I'm sorry, I just had a lot to do until I could get to it. And it's actually good that I did wait because there's a new release out. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. openBSD right after this. OpenBSD is a operating system that has been around for quite some time. It is currently on version 6.9, and that was released August the 27th, 2021. So, yeah, it's been out for a little bit, but not so long as it wouldn't catch a review, and that's what I'm going to be looking at today. So, I guess I probably should look at the backstory first about OpenBSD. It was forked from NetBSD, and there's a whole history about some of the open versions of BSD, all the things that happened with the lawsuits between USL, Unix System Laboratories, and the BSD community, and how all that shook out. But I'm not going to get into that. So Theo Durat is the founder and the leader of the OpenBSD project. And their first release, 1.1, appeared on October the 18th, 1995. So as you can see, they've been around a long, long time. But why would you consider OpenBSD over some of the other, over Linux or even over FreeBSD or even some of the others? Well, there's a lot of good reasons for it. First of all, it's very Unix-like, just like FreeBSD is and Solaris is. They're all, you can't say Unix, sorry, that's a trademark. And so we always have to refer to these as Unix-like, but the constructs are very much in line with the Unix philosophies. It does have good documentation. There are a number of third-party sites that support it with full user manuals. I'll put a list of some of those in the show notes today. There's also an FAQ, which is on the OpenBSD website. And you can go out there and it'll show you how to do installation and some simpler tasks. It'll get you started. But I'll explain this a little bit. Their philosophy on documentation is more in line with the way that Bell Labs did things. And so, yeah, that to me is a good thing. To you, maybe a little foreign given the fact the way things work today. But so I think if I'm right about this, I think they actually started in the US, and then the US State Department put restrictions on systems there were export controls actually on systems that were using what they considered advanced cryptography at the time, it was RSA, and would not allow those cryptography elements to be exported out of the US without approval. So yeah, so they moved the project to Toronto so they could continue to do that. Yeah. So why would you consider OpenBSD over anything else? So I don't know if you know this, but OpenSSH is actually a project sponsored and created by OpenBSD. So that's where it comes from. If you want the latest releases of OpenSSH, OpenBSD is going to give those to you. Also, there's OpenSMTPD, there's OpenRSync. Again, all of these are projects by OpenBSD. OpenNTPD, OpenBGPD, RPKI client, and LibreSSL, which was the Libre version of an SSL server. Also, Mandocs and more. So there's a lot of things that are inside this, and I'll have some links as to all the innovations that OpenBSD has brought. There are so many. There's so many. So you may not know this one, but the PF packet filter, that actually is in use by pfSense today. So if you're familiar with pfSense, you know of one of their projects that OpenBSD created. There's also CARP, HTTPD. Now they didn't invent HTTPD, of course, but there's RelayD and then the virtual management systems. They I don't know if they really consider their VM production ready yet, but it's still in development and they're still working on it. So I don't know if they actually consider that production. If somebody knows, you can leave a comment below. There are so many security features in openBSD. Its focus is on security. They have been, I would say, probably the leader in bringing more security features out to other operating systems as well as, of course, to their own. And I'll talk about that at the end too. They've kind of come under some criticism by a lot of people, but I don't, I'm not here to criticize them. I think the things that they are doing is quite amazing, actually. For example, kernel randomization, where you have ASLR, it's not the same as ASLR as Linux uses, but it is truly trying to randomize the kernel. In fact, they go so far as to relink the kernel on each reboot. And you're probably thinking, oh my God, that's going to take forever. Actually, no. It actually only takes a few seconds for openBSD to relink the kernel on each reboot. It's that streamlined and that fast. There is an API that has replaced one of the problems with C and C strings is that they are vulnerable to buffer overflows. Neither the linker nor the compiler checks on string copy or string cat to see whether or not the buffer that you're writing into or copying strings from one to another, it will actually hold the text, and whether or not the amount of data you're moving it will overflow the buffer on the destination. And as a result, you're able to pop out of the memory that is allocated to your string and read other things that happen to be in line with it. So, yes, it is string copy and string cat. They've never really been all that great. And the GNU libraries came up with their method called string and copy and string and cat, Nancy and Nancy. But I'll show you today, those aren't actually very good either. In fact, they're pretty confusing. I don't think they work the way that they should. And you can still overflow a buffer even with those. Now, the version that openBSD developed, which by the way is not in the GNU C libraries or in their compiler or linker, is the string L copy and string L cat. And they actually, the compiler and the linker checks for unsafe strings or out of bounds strings. So they actually do that for you. And during compile time, if you're trying to move a buffer that is larger than the receiving buffer, it'll actually say that. It'll actually flag it and say, hey, you got a problem. So yeah, you won't get that warning under GNU C. Some of the security features, in addition, is ProPolice, which manages the memory protection model for OpenBSD. There's also Pledge and Unveil. There is also the write XOR execute. So what does that mean? So what it means is that, remember I've talked about this before, that we needed something that would allow us to mark memory as being writable or contains executable code. If you cannot have both, is what that is saying. I can make it writable but not executable. I can make it executable but not writable. So that is what that is actually saying, and that is one of the features of OpenBSD. That if it is code, if it's a code page that's occupying memory, I can't just insert code into it and install malware on your machine. And even if you did figure out a way to get malware into the kernel, it's going to blow it away on the next reboot anyway. So security features such as cryptography, we've talked about that. They have implemented a very straightforward cryptographic system, which implements some of the latest thinking in cryptography if you want to take advantage of it. But to accurately support that, most cryptographic algorithms need to have a good pseudo-random number generator. I mean, the ones on Linux have patterns, they repeat certain things. They're not. I mean, I'm going to create an argument here, but arguably Linux is not as good at producing pseudo-random numbers as OpenBSD is. They have strong pseudo-random number generation, which has been, I think it's been tested several different times for Does it create patterns? Is there repeatability that's going on in it? You know, those kinds of things that you look for in a pseudo-random generator, and it has passed all of the tests up till now. So, I mean, those tests evolve over time as we learn more, but yeah. There's also a built-in cryptographic hash. They felt that pretty good privacy or PGP is too slow to do signing of information. It's too complicated. It's too slow. So they came up with a better way of doing that. They also use bcrypt. That's based on Bruce Schneier's Blowfish block cipher. So if you're interested in, they also offer swap partition encryption. One of the ways that you can leak information is, of course, your passwords could be dumped out of memory into your swap file and in plain text. Not good. So they do allow for swap partition encryption. There is network stack randomization, so it's harder to detect and find known locations where data is being stored in memory. And even if you did know, the randomization would change those. All of the innovations contributed to the open source community. Now that's both for BSD and Linux. I mean, this goes beyond that. OpenBSD has code branches into macOS, iOS, tvOS, Solaris, Linux. I mean, there are branches of this code running everywhere. But they've had so many innovations that I'm just going to give you a website address so you can go there to look at it. One of the things I will tell you, though, about openBSD, and it's similar to FreeBSD, this is a complete release that's done by them. Linux, on the other hand, all the distributions have to go out to different developers to pull those changes in. They have to then assemble them, and their trust on the testing is, of course, on the developer that supplied the code. Do they fully test on Linux? Yes, to some degree they do. But is it fully tested the way you would expect to see that done? Debian probably comes the closest to doing that. But as far as the ability of OpenBSD, they do not pull in code from other sources. They are the owner of the code base, so it's all released as one thing. And yeah, you don't get piecemeal releases. They get update when there's vulnerabilities. They release them all together. So yeah. OpenBSD's cycle is semi-annually. They come out with new releases. Each release increments by 0.1. So you would have 6.8, then 6.9, then 7.0. That's the way they do things. So the current release, as I said, is 6.9, and that was released on August the 27th. There is markings on their releases. So the releases every 6 months, but then they do stable releases, which are releases plus patches. So those could be testing releases. Those could be releases that are going out to fix vulnerabilities or bugs or whatever in the normal core. And there is a mechanism that's within OpenBSD that allows you to do patching of the system, as well as there is also a mechanism to allow you to do full upgrades from one release to another. Now, if I remember correctly, with OpenBSD, it was always like if you got 2 release levels behind, you would always want to go incrementally up. You wouldn't want to just jump from 6.7, say, to 6.9. You would want to incrementally upgrade from 6.7 to 6.8. Then on that 6.8 system that you would be running, you would then incrementally upgrade to 6.9. So. And then, of course, current is the current development branch. So, man pages. In Unix, all of the man pages came with the system. Whether you installed the packages or not, you had the man pages on your system. OpenBSD carries that same philosophy. So, if you want to learn about something before you install it, you can do that. Now, the man pages traditionally on Unix were not just descriptions of the command and the options. They also included, the reasoning behind it, the purpose, and then examples. Linux, to some degree, does follow that a bit, but you have to install the package to bring the man pages in with it. Because the problem is when you're assembling everything, you don't have a full view of all the man pages. You don't have them. You'd have to have those those system packages on your system before you would get them. That's not the case with openBSD. Uh, they also have expanded it, and the man pages serve as the principal source of documentation for the system. Now, yeah, there are places you can go to get manuals. There are PDFs that go through the full process of the boot, for example, and explain that. There's also fact pages on openBSD which describes how to do certain tasks. So and of course there's forums, and there's all those things that you would normally expect. You'll find, I think, from just like FreeBSD, if you go out for help, and as long as you're courteous, you'll find that most of them will be courteous as well. So yeah, you're always going to run into that one person that's going to say, why didn't you read the manual? Go back, leave me alone. But you find that everywhere, right? Uh, as far as the supported hardware, there isn't an official list on OpenBSD that I'm aware of. Now, maybe you are, but there is a site that publishes demessages from systems that have successfully booted a particular version of OpenBSD, and they will publish those and keep track of those on this site. So I'll provide that for you if you're interested in looking up your hardware to see how well it is supported. File systems that are used by OpenBSD, Unix originally used UFS. Berkeley came out with their own file system called, now this is not the same thing as the flash file system, but Berkeley's fast file system, or FFS, came out first long ago. And then this is version 2 of that, and developed for OpenBSD. So and there are a number of other BSDs that use this as well. So it is a good file system. But it is not. Don't confuse it with Linux's flash file system. It isn't the same. They just happen to share the same acronym. Max file sizes can be 8 zettabytes. They can also be the files. The max file system. The max file size can also be the same. 256 characters max for the file name, and that's all I know for sure. They also replace sudo. They consider sudo too complicated. It's overly complex. It doesn't need to be, and so they provide do as. And do as is a single line configuration. So as you can see here, I would just do a permit, and then if I didn't want a password prompt, it would just say no pass. And then I would assign DJ Ware as root. I can also do a space command and then list the commands that I want this particular user to be able to use do as on. So I can limit the type of commands, like maybe I could limit an admin to a reboot, or I could limit maybe a full system admin to a handful of utilities that they could use to manage the system. They wouldn't be able to necessarily do a compile into the kernel, for example. Something like that. Anyway, other things, yeah, OpenBSD doesn't use systemd at all. They use RC. They also do not use pulse audio. They have developed a much faster, much more streamlined system for audio on their system, which is considered by many to be superior, of course, to pulse audio, minus the problems that pulse audio always seems to have with losing its mind. Also, they offer higher or hierarchy, which allows you to look at the file system directory structure of the OpenBSD, and then there are definitions for what each of those are. I've talked about this before. /bin and /sbin today under Linux are linked to user bin and user sbin. However, that was never the original thought of Unix. The reason for those directories /bin and /sbin were to put statically linked common system admin utilities that could be used in the event that you had a file system failure on your USR mount point, because typically in those days your root was not mounted on the same drive as your USR. So it was possible that you could end up with a system that didn't have a user coming up because the drive was down. So you needed to have enough tools where you could do a check on the file system. You could rebuild the file system if needed, or you could replace the drive and then recover with a backup. So that was the reason for the statically linked, is it didn't depend on any kind of pieces moving and working in order to be able to run the code. So anyway, you can get a full list of all the directories and what their intention is. So one of the more interesting things about the installation process is that your response file are emailed to root. So the next time you log in on after a reboot, you will find all the responses that you use to create your version of openBSD. You could then use that to create an auto install if you were going to install this out to, if you wanted multiple copies of this installation to go out to multiple sets of machines, or you can run an unattended install as well, and there are utilities for that. So it makes it easier to deploy in a edge or cloud environment, for example. So why don't we do an installation, and then you can see for yourself how things are done. I'll be right back. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a VM, and so we'll give it a name. And I'll need to get my disk image. Now, I downloaded this from the openBSD site, and it's right here. It's an ISO file. Now, I don't know if this really matters all that much, but I just mark it as other. I'm going to leave those default. Probably need to run this somewhere else. I am going to move this over here, though. I'm going to run it off my ZFS pool, see how well that works. Haven't done too much with that yet, other than just a few tests. Let's see if openBSD likes it over there. Now, I won't need a whole lot of memory. Yeah, it's pretty lightweight, but you'll see that. And then I'm going to leave that as it is, and we'll go ahead and finish that up. Okay. Go to the newly created one and open a console. It's coming up. We'll turn on scaling. Okay. So what it's actually asking me here is, do I want to install? Do I want to do the upgrade, or do an auto install, or just go to the shell and do my own thing? I'm going to install this from scratch. So I'm going to do an install. Now I can do an L here, and it will show me all of the keyboard layouts that are supported. The default is US, so I can just do that. Host name, we'll just do OB1, and then configure my network interfaces. It already knows that there's one there called EM0, and I'll take the DHCP, and nothing for IPv6, and that's it. I don't have any other interfaces I'm going to configure. So you can skip this. I'm going to add it. But if you skip it, you've disabled your account. Do I want to enable SSHD? Yes. I do expect to run the X Windows system. However, I don't want it to start up automatically. Typically, in these types of systems, they're more suited for servers. I don't think, yeah, I don't think you'll find this particularly fun to use as a desktop. But all right, so I'm going to go ahead and set up a user. I should have given it my name. And Yeah, I'm not going to allow root to log in on SSH, my time zone. Again, you can do a question mark for a list if you need to get one that you don't know off the top of your head. And WD0 is the default drive. I am going to do the whole partition, and in this case, it will actually cut it up so that I have separate temp, var, and home directories, which, yeah, and I'll go ahead and use the auto layout. And then you have something called sets, and sets are groups of packages that can be installed together as a group. So, yeah, it's asking me for where my CD is, and that's the one I want. Now, I could turn these off, some of these off, but really, like if I didn't want compilers, I might turn off comp69. If I didn't really want the X windows, I could probably turn those off too. But yeah, I'm just going to leave this alone. This is fine. All right, I need to say done here. So this one, the directory does not contain a SHA-256 signature. That's okay. It'll create one anyway. A new system is not going to have one anyway. So it is safe to continue. And then I'll go through the installation of the sets that I have asked for. And you can see it's pretty quick. It's much different than installing Unix back in the day. I had as many as I think 42 floppy drives, floppy disks. I much preferred to install it from tape. It was much easier, even though the tape drives weren't that fast anyway. But installing it from floppy, oh, that was not fun. Floppy shell. So here we go. There's relinking to create a unique kernel. And when we reboot, you'll notice that it does that every time. And I'm ready to reboot. So it did find some patches to install. So I'm going to go ahead and log in as root. Keyboard bounce. So my IP address today is right here, 192.168.1.110. So I'm going to pause for a second. So I'm going to go over here so I can copy and paste stuff in if I need to. But the first thing I want to find out yeah, turn that off. Turn off the caps lock. That'd be good. How much space this is actually taking on disk. So I have 95.3 meg in use. I have 841 meg available on my root partition. And then you'll notice that, of course, my largest partition is 7.1 gig or 7.4 gig, and that's in home. So, yeah, and then the rest of them are kind of spread out according to the way that you would normally expect. So, you shouldn't have too much in your root partition because your temp files and your log files are over on their own larger partitions. But then you have top, and top is showing 34 meg in use right here. It's showing 34 meg in use. There's not a whole lot of overhead, as you can see. It's pretty idle. So this is a very lightweight operating system. But remember, I don't have X Windows up and running. I mean, yeah, it didn't. I don't think it actually started. Let's see. No, not EF, AUX. Yeah, there's no X windows running. So yeah, it's light because there isn't a manager up and running, but there are some system services that are up, like SSHD. Yeah, PS minus EF, I think will come back with an error. Yep, doesn't know what to do with that. So on Berkeley, it was always AUX, and if you look up the man for that, you'll see that display information about a process for all users. And then the U and the X was display information associated with the keywords, user PID, all of that stuff is what you want to see. And then X is display information about processes without controlling terminals, which means that you want to see the daemons. Yeah, the daemons. I think it's package add. Yep, it's been a while, but it's been a while. And I think I can just put in htop. Now, I don't think NeoFetch is available, so I think ScreenTop is what I have. ScreenFetch is what I have to use. Git might be installed already. Don't know. And let's see if we can find higher. We'll find out if htop has the bug in it that I saw before on FreeBSD. Can't find higher. So let's do a screen fetch. See what we get there. 31 packages are installed. Not a lot, not much. And then, whoa, yeah, the memory bug is in this one, 511 meg. Yeah, I'm not believing that too much. Let's see. Top is still saying 34 meg. Let's see what it actually is. Just put a VMstat in by itself. 52 meg is what it's saying as well. 34 meg is average. So yeah, I don't think htop is calculating memory correctly, although screen fetch is. So yeah, and then let's see what we get if we now Linus understands directory opt. Oh, this predates opt, doesn't it? That's all right. I'll go to my root directory and get is here. Got a few things that are weak. I'm watching, looks like some permissions that could be set better. Missing some core utilities that they're recommending. Let's see what the overall score is, though. 70. Wow. 4% fat higher than Linux. Um, harmful shell. Oh, we got some passwordless accounts. And OpenNTPD is not synchronizing the system time. All right. Those are things we need to check into. That's important. Let's see what our date is currently. 1202. That's right. But it might be off by a few seconds. So you do have You do have full compilers here to use, as well as linkers and other utilities and so forth. I probably will come back and maybe do a more in-depth tutorial. It has been so long since I've used Berkeley Linux, or excuse me, Berkeley or Berkeley Unix or any Unix-like version of Berkeley, that I'm a little rusty. I haven't been playing with a FreeBSD server lately, and so I probably will brush up a little bit. These have I would like to come back and go through some of the security tools, and I think that probably would be beneficial. So yeah, I think what I'm going to do is just kind of hold things here for today. So, um, some of the final thoughts. So, OpenBSD has come into some criticism from some of the security professionals. I remember that in a couple of the conferences, some of the security professionals were saying, well, yes, it has a lot of security tools and a lot of security items that you can use, but they just thought some of it was unnecessary, some of it didn't make any sense. But some of the things that I see them doing are I don't know if I disagree with the. I mean, I'm not a security professional, but I mean, from what I have seen of what they're doing, it appears to me that they are doing the right things. Um, it's a game, right? I mean, what you think is going to be enough today is not going to be enough tomorrow. So, yeah, if they could just be way ahead of the game. I mean, they do know what they're doing. I mean, pfSense is relying on their PF firewall for a long time now, and it's one of the best ones that are out there. Yeah, it's no operating system is perfect. If you find a developer that's perfect, let me know. It happens. They creep in. But the question is, I remember there were two occasions back in, I think it was around 2012, 2015. I think that's right. uh, don't quote me on the dates, but there were two vulnerabilities that came about that that were for the BSD system, and those were also affecting NetBSD, FreeBSD, and some of the other builds as well as and OpenBSD too. But OpenBSD was the first one to jump on and fix it. I don't know how long it took FreeBSD, but it was longer than a day, and it was longer than a month just because I don't know how their release cycles work, but they were very slow in getting the patch out, whereas OpenBSD was not. So yeah, I mean they're not perfect, but the question is, do you own up to the fact that you've got a vulnerability, and do you own up to the fact that you will fix it and get it fixed as soon as possible? Do I expect them to fix something in a day? No, of course not. I mean, as long as they do their due diligence to try to hunt it down, figure it out, yeah, I'm good with that. I mean, why wouldn't I? In my humble opinion, OpenBSD, as far as in comparison to FreeBSD, now, if I was going to use this as a workstation, I probably wouldn't use OpenBSD. If I was going to use this as a server, I would use OpenBSD and not FreeBSD. I would probably be more likely to lean toward FreeBSD for a workstation because it's just easier to set up. Yeah, you could bring all that stuff in here too, but it would take you longer. You'd have more configuration work to do. But hey, up to you, I guess. Besides, who else releases artwork and music for every release? I mean, they release songs and they release artwork, and you can see that out on their website. So, yeah, that's all. That's all I had today. Go try it out. Go try it out for yourself. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. It's a very lightweight, very efficient release. I don't care what the security researchers say, I think they have some very good ideas about how they're doing things. Now, maybe it's overkill today, but I have not, nothing that security adds on is going to make your system faster. So for every security feature you add into the system, it's going to slow your system down. That's given. Yeah, they aren't designed to increase performance, but yeah, be nice if they did. They did concentrate a little bit more on performance, and that I think is one of the differences that OpenBSD has. They do look at both. They weigh the pluses and minuses between implementing something this way and having less performance, and that way and having better performance. So they always lean toward the do it the way that has a little bit better performance. That's all I had today. Hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please like and subscribe. Hope to see you all again real soon. And let me know in the comments below if you tried it out and if you liked it or not. Hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.